The Sun Devils 2024 recruiting class could have big implications on how the team does this year, and these are a handful of guys that I think could be the biggest breakouts.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. Stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36, the podcast LO_Sun Devils. If you have not hit subscribe on YouTube yet, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Trying to get to 1,000 followers here. We are right around the corner. As of today, we are at 862. You guys have been crazy hitting that subscribe button. I know that we can get there sooner rather than later, and we'll find a way to celebrate together as a channel when we get to that mark. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in. On today's edition of the show, we are going to take a look at the incoming freshmen. And we've talked a lot about this Sun Devils team. We've talked a lot about the transfers. We've talked a lot about the returners, all the new faces here. This is a recruiting class that I've said before, I don't really know what expectations you can place on them because there are so many veterans returning and through the transfer portal that are on this team. And similar to last year, you didn't really have a ton of guys being forced into positions and into roles with the team. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing to not have to force these players to accomplish what you need them to accomplish. It's good to have them take a year. And that could be the case again this year for this recruiting class. But this is a really intriguing class to me and a group that's already shown quite a bit of potential. You've got guys that are highly recruited that are coming here. You also have guys that have really stood out in training camp and previously stood out in spring ball. Today, we're going to talk about three guys in particular who I think could absolutely stand out big time this year. But before we get to those three, I do want to hit up a few honorable mentions here. First of all, offensive line. As much as I would love to say Terrell Kim or Champ Westbrooks, the problem is this offensive line is too deep with veterans, and I think you're probably looking at all these guys redshirting. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to getting the younger guys out there, getting Westbrooks, getting Terrell Kim out there. It's just one of those situations where I think you can take your time with them and allow them to develop for a year, maybe 2 years, grow into their bodies, work on their techniques under Coach Saga, and eventually become studs. I had a really hard time not picking guys in the secondary, but Tony-Louis-Nkuba, one of the biggest guys who has stood out to me. I decided to only pick one player in the secondary to highlight as one of my top three most important, top three most productive, breakout, whatever you want to call it. So I did put Tony-Louis-Nkuba in my honorable mentions, although he was right there, like a 1A, 1B with the person I did pick. Plas Johnson Jr. also looks really good. I've been high on him. I am excited to see what he can do. Plas Johnson. Plas is really interesting. He's recruited as a wide receiver out of high school. He is playing defensive back for the team. He could be a two-way player. Is he someone that ASU's going to get tricky with? Is he going to be kind of that like a Travis Hunter kind of player? Not so much in terms of talent, because we all know that Travis Hunter is arguably the best player in college football, but could he be that kind of player where he is getting snaps on both sides of the football for you? Obviously, being a receiver, he's got ball skills too, so maybe he could do something in the secondary. Jason Brown is a four-star kid. You can't ignore him. He's just in a really loaded backfield. There's not going to be a ton of opportunities for him to seize like a significant amount of carries. We will see him this year, and he is absolutely the future at the position. As of right now, he's probably RB6 on this depth chart, and it's difficult to envision a scenario short of injury where he's just going to get to a point where he's getting double-digit touches a game. We will see him this year. We will be able to get a glimpse into the talent and the upside he has. I just don't know how much is going to be. Now then, let's get into the three guys that I think are going to be the most impactful for 2024. We'll start off with the most obvious name, a name that if you have listened to this podcast in the last 8 months, you know that we're a big fan here of 4-star tight end Jayden Fortier. Fortier is a two-way player, sort of. He's super athletic, super talented, the number one recruit out of Oregon for what it's worth, and he's going into a position room that's wide open. Now, one of the things that I was cautious over the summer is he was recovering from an ACL surgery, not a tear, just a surgery, a little cleanup. We weren't 100% positive on the time frame of when he would be back. Well, he's back. He is practicing. He is in full pads. He is working out with the team. He's good to go. He is not anybody that we have any concerns with at this point in time. Now that he is back, and now that we know he is back, we can get right back into our hype. Because before that surgery, Jayden Fortier was one of the darlings of this podcast. He is coming into a tight end room that is wide open, like we said. There's guys that are really exciting. Shimon Mateer is absolutely one of the most intriguing players on this team, let alone at the tight end position. Cameron Harpel is there. Marqueston Douglas is there. There's bodies in the tight end room. You just don't have a tight end 1 yet or a tight end 2. The depth chart has not been established yet, which means that Jayden Fortier could very, very easily find himself onto the football field sooner rather than later. I did mention before that he is kind of a two-way player. He did play some safety. He's not going to play safety on this team. The reason I bring it up is because that just fits the profile of how athletic and how gifted this kid is to be able to come to Arizona State and instantly give you any kind of production, a spark, whatever have you. Jayden Fortier is special. This is a potential lightning in a bottle kind of player where at 6'5", 220 pounds, and he runs around like a ballerina, and he can play the ball really well. He obviously can high point. Let's see if he can become a good route runner. Let's see if he can become a good blocker. But the tools are there for him. He's also working with Coach Jason Mons, and Mons is a tight end guru. He's recruiting the position at an insane rate right now. They got another 4-star next year in AJ Aya, who committed over the summer. You've got guys that are coming in through the transfer portal that are interested in playing with Mons. Jayden Fortier is one of the first experiments here for Jason Mons to kind of flex his ability to coach up this position. I'm really excited. And I think that Fortier could end up being a really, really good player in this offense. The question is, how big is the role going to be, and how quickly will he be able to grab that role? And by that, I mean, it's a wide open position, so he could be tight end 1. He can also be tight end 4. And at that point, you just kind of wonder, when is he going to get on the field? First of all, I think he's too talented to keep off the field. He will get onto the field at some point this year, and hopefully when he gets out there, he will be able to absolutely stand out in the way that I believe that he can. But it's not 100% guaranteed. I feel personally very confident about it. I'm also really curious how the tight end gets involved this year. Last year, they really went to Jalen Conyers. He was second on the team in receptions and yards. They got Bryce Pierre involved as well. They involved the tight end last year, but they didn't necessarily have one guy. Conyers was the closest thing to it, and they still kind of went with a committee. Is it going to be the same thing this year? Are we going to see maybe Shimon Mateer as tight end 1, and then it's kind of a drop-off after that? Is Marqueston Douglas tight end 1, and it's a drop-off? Is it a full-on committee? You've got 3 guys that are going to be rotated on each drive. Like, we don't know what to expect here. What we do know, and the reason why he's on my list, is because of how utterly talented he is, how exciting it is to have a player of his caliber on this football team, and the potential to get on the field quite a bit. To me, once Fortier flashes, it's going to be hard to keep him off of the football field. There's a lot of potential and upside here with Jayden Fortier. Now that we know he's healthy, he's going to find his way onto the football field sooner rather than later. He's going to make big plays too. Speaking of big plays, there's another guy on the defensive side of the football that I want to get into more. We'll talk about him in a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. You can also try their zone deals, where you pick a section and Game Time chooses the seats. Their all-in pricing feature, you can toggle it. You can see the total up front, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. Can't get that very many other places, guys. Seat views, you can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee that I mentioned, you're going to get 110% of the difference from Game Time if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wherever you're getting your podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. Shout out my everydayers who are here every day. If you have not hit subscribe yet on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Help us get to 1,000 followers before the end of the year. Also want to shout out the Locked On College Football podcast with good friend Spencer McLaughlin as we get you ready for a new season on the gridiron with discussions on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, the new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back into our conversation, hopping into the secondary, and someone that I think could end up being a big-time playmaker this year, and that's Rodney Bimage. Rodney Bimage has looked every bit as good as any other corner on this team. And keep in mind, ASU is completely overhauling this corner spot. They lost their 3 starters from last year, plus one of their best depth guys. Ro Torrance, Ed Woods, D. Ford are gone from the outside. Jordan Clark's gone from the inside. 4 guys that you're trying to replace. You have brought in a lot of talented players. LT Welsh coming from LSU, he's probably corner 1. You set it and forget it with him. He looks really good. There's a reason he was highly recruited out of high school. There's a chance that he is corner 1 for the whole year. And like I said, set it, forget it. You don't even need to worry about him. At nickel, replacing Jordan Clark, Cole Martin is perfect. You just slide him in to that exact same role. I don't know if he can do safety the way that Jordan Clark was able to in a pinch, but he's still a great nickel defender for you. The question was on the other side, opposite of LT Welsh, who is going to be corner 2? Well, ASU brings in Javen Robinson from Washington State, somebody who's familiar with Brian Ward. There's a potential for him to be that next guy there. There's some younger guys like Keith Abney and Keontae Bradley that were competing as well. But then you have these freshmen. And these freshmen look good. 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 Certified, put a stamp on it. I already mentioned Tony-Louis-Nkuba is like my 1B here. Rodney Bimage is my 1A. And it's almost like a preference thing. I don't really have any specific like gripes as to why I would pick one over the other. Both of them are identical at 6 foot, 170 pounds. Bimage slightly higher recruited, but at the end of the day, one of these two is going to find their way onto the football field this year and potentially be a starting corner. Bimage, to me, has flashed a little bit more. It's not by much, though. It really is a 1A, 1B situation. But I didn't want to do that, so I went with Bimage. Now, Bimage is someone who really looks ahead of the game. He doesn't look like a freshman. And I'm not saying he looks like an All-American or anything like that, but he's already understanding the game at the next level, and he's getting up to speed with playing collegiate Power 5 football. We got a chance to see him in spring ball. He looked great in spring ball. You noticed him then. And it's one of those things where it's like, again, like we talked about at the top of the show, like, what are the expectations for this recruiting class? What are the expectations for a recruiting class that brought in 6 new faces to the secondary, including Bimage? I don't really know what is fair to ask or what is fair to anticipate from these guys. And yet, Bimage out the gate was a stud. And he clearly was in the lab over the summer because he took that momentum and that success that he took in March and April and applied it into training camp so far through 3 weeks, just starting 3 weeks, about 2.5, I suppose, whatever. He looks good, and he looks like he is right in the thick of it for the competition to be corner 2 across from LT Welsh. Now, it is worth noting that LT is not guaranteed that starting job. There is a chance that he gets usurped. Now, I don't think that happens because he's been playing really, really good. But nobody in this corner room, outside of Cole Martin, in my opinion, really has a starting spot locked down. LT Welsh feels like the closest thing to it. But this is where Rodney Bimage could really capitalize, is it's wide open. You could be a brand new freshman. You could be one of the younger guys, a redshirt freshman or a redshirt sophomore, someone who hasn't seen a ton of time. You could be a transfer. You could be a returning player. It's a very wide open opportunity here. There's no set standard for you have to be X, Y, and Z to be the starting corner. It's wide open. There's no discrimination between how many times, how many years you've played, or what your recruiting was out of high school. You're all the same. Everybody's on the same playing field. And I absolutely love that. I think that's going to bring out some of the best competition that the Sun Devils have seen in a long time, which is something that Kenny Dillingham has really pushed and emphasized, is competition. Nobody's job is safe. Rodney Bimage is going to make it that much more difficult for the guys ahead of him to feel like they are safe, to feel like they have their jobs and they're all cushy and don't have to worry about it. There's no corner here, on the outside at least, that should be comfortable with a starting role with the way that Rodney Bimage is playing. And the other freshmen too, Tony-Louis-Nkuba and Plas Johnson Jr., Martell Hughes, there are plenty of, or you know what? Martell made the transition to linebacker, so scratch that. There are guys here in the secondary besides Rodney Bimage that are going to be able to push. Bimage, to me, has just been one of the biggest standouts in camp, not even just from the freshmen and this recruiting class, but just period. He feels like one of the biggest winners for the Sun Devils this offseason. And we'll have to discuss some bigger winners down the road as well. But Rodney Bimage, man. This kid is the truth. I'm planting my flag on him. I am not the first person to do so. I will not be the last person to do so. But you heard it from me. Rodney Bimage is going to be a beast. There's one more guy I want to talk about. Someone who's really under the radar and I think could end up being a secret weapon for the Sun Devils, this team, especially on special teams. We're going to talk about him in a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out my everydayers who are here every day. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. If you have not hit subscribe on YouTube yet, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and help us get to 1,000 subscribers so that we can find a way to celebrate as a channel. And check out Locked On College Football as well. Spencer McLaughlin's great. He's been on the show more than a handful of times, and he knows what he's talking about. So if you're trying to get in the know with everything that's not Arizona State Sun Devils, I suggest that you check out that channel. Let's go ahead and wrap up the conversation with someone that this podcast has not talked a lot about, and someone that I don't think a lot of people are familiar with as of yet. Zechariah Sample. And I know that there's going to be some people that will say, Richie, I don't think you've ever brought up Zechariah Sample before. To which I would say, it wouldn't be much. The way I look at Zechariah Sample is, yeah, this is probably a redshirt kid. 5'9", 160 pounds. Someone that definitely feels like a stash and develop player for you. But with that being said, this kid is fast. He's freaky fast. And he's got some prowess for special teams. This is where I think he could be one of your most important newcomers. One of your most important, maybe even most productive freshmen is on special teams. As we have talked before, special teams is wide open right now. We have some favorites. Melkon Stovall feels like the favorite for special teams. There's the ability from Jordan Tyson. There's the ability from Relief Brown. Outside of that, I don't think it's ever been more wide open for the Sun Devils in the return game. Because even those three, they could all find roles to the point where you don't want to put them on special teams. Jordan Tyson could be wide receiver 1, and you go, you know what? We have other guys. We don't want to risk him getting injured on a kick return. Could say the same thing about Relief Brown or Melkon Stovall. Those three could all end up finding such important roles with the team that you just don't want to expose them any more than you have to. This is where Zechariah Sample can absolutely eat it up. This kid is so gifted. And he's tiny and a spark plug, and it just makes him that much more fun to watch. Because if he makes you miss, he's tiny, so it's not like you have a big surface area to try and tackle this kid. And he's fast. I don't know if I mentioned that. The quickness that he has to be able to plant his foot and completely change his position. Phenomenal. There's so much God-given talent here that when he eventually gets on the football field, I think you're going to have something special. He reminds me a little bit of Caleb Black coming in from last year. I wasn't really sure what Caleb Black's role was going to look like. It ended up kind of being a redshirt year, and that's exactly what it was. But it kind of ended up looking like we're gonna take some time, see what we can do for you, and develop you. And that could be exactly what Zechariah Sample is looking at this year. But if he gets onto the football field, to me, it makes too much sense to not put him in the special teams unit and have him be a return specialist and potentially return ace for you. There's just that ability for him. And if he does do that, well, all of a sudden it's like, maybe we should get him some touches on offense. I mean, look what this kid did. He just had a X amount of yard punt return. and it placed us in plus field position. Why don't we try and get a little creative here? Maybe we put him on the field. Maybe we get him an end around. Maybe we design a way to get the football to him on offense and see what he can do. This is a really intriguing player because I feel like it's one extreme or the other. I feel like it's either Zechariah Sample is one of the most important players on special teams and someone who gets involved on offense, or we don't hear from him this year. And he is a stash and develop player, someone that they want to grow into his body a little bit more, learn to catch up to the speed. Now, this is, of all the guys that I'm looking at, this is by far the biggest projection because we do not have a lot of time to see Zechariah Sample on the football field just yet. We are still getting accustomed to his name. And it's not as though he's been the standout that Rodney Bimage has been. This is 100% projection. And this is a Hail Mary throw from me on, hey, this kid could potentially break out. But the upside here is as good as anybody else. Simply based off of the untapped potential that Zechariah Sample has. But again, this is a Hail Mary. It's all or nothing. You either see this kid turn into one of the best kept secrets on the Sun Devils, or we have to wait a year to find out more about him. And to be clear, it's not a bad thing if he has to redshirt. It's not a bad thing if any of these guys, if Jayden Fortier, if Terrell Kim, Rodney Bimage, Tony-Louis-Nkuba, Ramar Williams, Kyan McDonald, any of the incoming guys, Jason Brown, it doesn't matter if these guys get on the field or if they redshirt because they're creating competition at their positions. And these are talented players who are all in and doing everything that they can to play at a high level. Very excited for these guys. And these three in particular, Jayden Fortier, Rodney Bimage, and Zechariah Sample, I believe could end up being your biggest impacts for the year, your most productive players for the year, and just flat out the most important freshmen for you this year. Everything is based off of circumstance, of course, but if everything goes their way, we could end up talking about them at the end of the year as some of the most important freshmen that the Sun Devils have had in the last several years. But I want to know what you guys think. Am I totally crazy? Am I right on track? Who's the freshman you're most excited for? Let me know in the comments. You can hit me up on Twitter at Richie Bradshaw36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your shows, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. If you have not hit subscribe on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and help us get to 1,000 followers. Once we get to that number, we will find a way to celebrate as a team. I don't know what that looks like. I am open to suggestions, but I know that we're going to get there because you guys are the best fans in the whole world. We will be back again tomorrow, and we're going to take a look at the incoming transfers that are going to have the biggest impact. We're going to pick 3 of them, which feels like an even tougher task than what we had to do today with the freshmen, because I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of production coming from those transfers. But we'll talk about them tomorrow, so I'll see you there. Till then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.